you go experience a story, you go watch a story, you tell a story, and you start to find out who you are by doing that. My nephew had a dream at one point. Someone made a little animated thing out of it and put it on the internet, which is quite cool. So anyways, he was having night terrors, and he ran around like a little knight, you know, a Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T, knight, and he had a little, you know, armor and a sword, and he'd run around the house with a little knight hat on, being a knight. And he was only like 4 or something, and he'd watched a lot of Disney movies, a lot of movies, so he kind of got the knight idea. He's acting that out, and he was having these terrors at night, right? And so he'd go to bed with his little knight hat and his sword, and he'd put him on his bed, and then at night he'd wake up screaming, and that happened for a very long time. And so when I went to visit, you know, I found out that this was happening, and he had a night terror. So the kid wakes up with night terrors, screaming, but can't remember anything, generally speaking. So anyways, this was happening, and so it happened one day, and I was sitting with him and his family at the breakfast table, and I said, did you have a dream? And he said, oh yes, I had a dream. I said, well, you know, what was your dream? And he said, well, I was out on this field, and I was surrounded by these dwarfs, and they came up to my knees, and they didn't have any arms, they had big feet, and they were covered with hair, and there was a cross shaved at the top of their head, and they were all greasy, and they had huge beaks, and everywhere I went they jumped at me with their beaks, and there was lots of them, and everybody was very quiet after he said this, because it was like, oh, that's why you're screaming at night. It's like, yeah, okay. And and then he said, but at the background there was a dragon, and the dragon would blow out smoke and fire, and then it would turn into these dwarfs. So it's like, man, that kid had a problem, right? It was like, well, what are you going to do? You fight off a dwarf, who cares? It's like, puff, 10 more. That's life, man. That's life. Really, that's the Hydra. You cut off one head, 7 more grow. That's life. Snakes everywhere. And you get rid of one, there'll be more. And so he figured that out. It's a hell of an existential shock when you're 4. And so he's like, he's a knight. He's thinking, what do I do about these dwarfs? Well, there's too many of them, but there's a dragon. Well, so I said, well, what could you do about that? Right? Loaded question. It implies that you could do something about that. Well, he kind of knew that, which is why he was running around like a knight. And he kind of figured that out. And he said, well, I get my dad, and I jump up on the dragon, and I poke out both of its eyes with my sword, and then I go right down its stomach to the place where the fire came out, the firebox, and then I'd carve a piece of the firebox out, and I'd make a shield. And that would be the end of that. And I thought, wow, good work, kid. Like, you really got it, right? It's the central human story. There's the terrible unknown, right? Fire breathing, generating trouble, and what do? You confront that. You confront that, and by confronting it, you get stronger. That's the shield, and that's what a human being is, and that's right. It's exactly right. And that was the end of his night terrors, by the way, which seems too good to be true, but it is actually true, because I followed up with his mother for a long time, and that was that. He catalyzed that part of his identity. He adopted the role of the mythological hero, and that's what he needed to do, because like there was there's a dragon and a bunch of dwarfs. Like, what the hell are you going to do about that? Run? That's not going to help. You know, if you run in a dream like that, the dwarves multiply and they get bigger, and you get smaller as you run. It's like, that is not a good solution, and people do that in their life all the time. And so the dwarves get bigger until they're giants, and they get smaller until there's nothing left of them, and then there's no recovery. That is not good.